Is your mic on? Everybody's mic on?
Test.
There. Come on, hurry up.
All right, welcome. I call to order the September 14th, 2015 meeting of the Haymarket Planning Commission. Roll call.
Present.
Here.
Here? Here. All right, second order of business, I move to approve the minutes of the PC regular meeting, August 10, 2015. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion.
I have significant issues with the draft minutes and the way they were written and the review of them, and I will be abstaining from the vote.
Okay, any other comments? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right,
Abstain.
Abstain.
All right, citizens' time. We're going to have two public hearings tonight, and we will give the citizens a chance to speak on those two issues. But do we have any citizen who would like to speak apart from those two public hearings? Please come forward, state your name and your address. Anybody? All right, seeing none, close citizens' time. Moving to public hearing. First item of business tonight is a special use permit application for in-home business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for an in-home occupation at 14932 Southern Crossing Streets in Haymarket. The Commission had several questions at the last Commission meeting regarding delivery, pickup times, employees, and parking. The applicant is here tonight and can answer any more specific questions, but generally delivery would be 1 to 2 times per week. Pickup times would be between 4:30 and 5:30 Monday through Friday, 9 to 12 on Saturday. By ordinance, they're not allowed to have any employees other than themselves and maybe one family member. And in parking, they have a space available on the driveway in front of their residence. So delivery 1 to 2 times per week in the afternoon or mornings on Saturday. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions. We do recommend approval of the application.
All right, does anyone have a question?
My question has to do with Saturday. I know some people picking up goods on Saturday, but I was curious about any cooking supplies. Would they be delivered on Saturday?
Oh, I find my flash drive.
Actually, Ms. Shear, do you mind addressing the Commission? This is the applicant, Ms. Harley.
Good evening. If you can just state your name and your address, please.
Katrina Harley, 14932 Southern Crossing Street, Haymarket, Virginia.
Thanks, ma'am.
The question was about deliveries. This is going to be a small business. Any deliveries would be through like Amazon, so it would be a small package from FedEx or things like that.
So you wouldn't have flour or sugar delivered on Saturday?
No.
You check yourself?
Yes. I would buy it on bulk from like Costco or BJ's.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Do we have any citizen that would like to speak on this? All right, we will, at this time, we'll take, anybody would like to, I move that we move on the special use permit application for in-home business, 14932 Southern Crossing Street, Haymarket, Virginia, for Crave Sweets. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving to Robinson's Paradise rezoning SUP.
Mr. Chair, have you closed the public hearing?
No, because we haven't addressed Robinson's Paradise.
I meant the first one.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, moving to Robinson's Paradise, rezoning SUP. Is there any citizen after Marchant?
We do have several members of the public here, Mr. Chairman, so I did want to briefly go through the presentation, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Does the mic, does the hand mic work? No, don't worry about it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this involves several applications, and you've seen some iterations already. But again, because of the public hearing tonight, I want to go briefly through the application. This is first a rezoning application to rezone 6 acres from R1 to R2 to allow up to 26 single small lot family dwellings along Robinson's Lane. Most of you may be familiar with the project, north of 66, west of Old Carolina Road. Originally, what you'll see on your left, the site was originally subdivided for 17 lots, 16 homes. The 17th lot was a stormwater management facility, and that's the layout and number of units that are permitted today. The layout on your right is the requested 26 units, again requesting an R2 single-family small lot subdivision. The second application is a special use permit to allow a shared access driveway. If I could point to that real quick. Coming in, Walter Robinson Lane, 2 cul-de-sacs, 2 lots are proposed to be accessed by a shared access driveway, and that is the request for the special use permit application. The application also involves a preliminary plat of subdivision, and then lastly, with this is a comprehensive plan amendment. Right now, the subject property is planned for low-density residential and to correspond with the requested zoning district of R2. The plan amendment would change this area from low-density residential to moderate-density residential. So there is a project summary that was distributed to you by the applicant. The applicant is also here. Maybe we want to make a few comments before the public hearing comments, and then afterward, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And once you close the hearing, Mr. Chairman, if you could just move it to the old business item for further discussion. So the applicant's representative is here. Did you want to say a few words, Mike? Okay, this is Mike Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Mike Johnson. I'm here to represent the applicant. I'd just like to make just a few points. What we're trying to do here is not, our density that we're proposing here would be in the low range of the R2 zoning, what's allowed by R2. I think we're like at 4.1. The range of R2, I think, is 4 to 8. So we're down on the lower end of that density range. A couple of things I'd just like to point out with the plan. One is the landscaping. We have put in perimeter buffers anywhere we're adjacent to a residential use. We have to either put in a 10-foot buffer, or if it's A1, we have a couple of places where we have 30-foot buffers. This area is a 30-foot buffer, and then around here, back through here, and then over here is a 10-foot buffer. Another thing that we've worked with staff is in this area, excuse me, Mike, you have to take the microphone. Sorry. In this area, VDOT, as part of their improvements, have put in an 8-foot trail, and it extends across the bridge, and then in this area of frontage, what we have done for our frontage.
Sir, do you mind just kind of turning them a little bit so folks can see? I know some people are trying to get out and about. Thank you. Well, if you could just kind of angle it where the public can, the other way, sir. We have the drawings. There you go. Thanks.
the VDOT trail that is being built now would extend to this entrance on Jefferson Street, and then part of our project will extend it across our frontage to our intersection, and then that at least gives it the ability to be extended further if Prince William County would choose to do that. One other thing we have done is working with the fire marshal. We did increase the diameter of this cul-de-sac, the lower cul-de-sac, to 81 feet. And that satisfied the fire marshal for his concerns regarding fire access in this area. I guess lastly, I'd like to bring up our off-street parking. We have provided a minimum of 3 spaces per lot off-street in the driveway, with 2 spaces in the house for the garage. That gives us a total of 130 spaces total for the entire project. And I think that's about all I wanted to bring up tonight.
All right, thank you. Do we have any citizen who would like to speak to the Robinson's Paradise rezoning? Please come up, state your name and address.
Thomas Utz, 6564 Jefferson Street. So, what this does to me is, here we are. This is us. This is our families right through here. So what this does to me is, everybody gets the paradise because everybody's going to get to see what they want to see. We don't get to see what we want to see.
All right, sir, do you mind moving that so we can see what you pointed out? Thanks.
It's back in here.
That's perfect.
Thanks.
So we're living down in here. Every home is represented right here. This is where we live at. We've been here for 20 years. We've been here for 20 years. All of us. Down here, this home, all of this was built back in 80s, 85. So, you know, this is home to us. Robinson's Paradise is paradise because everything that they want, they're getting. We're sacrificing our families for what they want to do. So I would say no. And if they wanted to do it, why not take those 7 lots from on the other side of that road, so that we don't see the backside of their houses, of whatever they're doing, regardless of a 10-foot buffer. I think it's unacceptable. It's not the standard that you guys set up, and they had a plan that was approved. They didn't want to do it. So I'm in a disagreement, non-favor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Angela Chamberlain, 6560 Jefferson Street. I have the last property, and he's exactly right. When you look out, you either see 66 or you're going to see everyone's backyard. What is that for us? I mean, we've lost our views. We've lost everything that we moved there for. Where does my road end? Where does my road begin? Where's my driveway? I mean, this is totally unacceptable. Everywhere that I turn on my property, I have someone's house, their backyard. So I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 backyards or the highway. Yeah, there's an older house in the middle there, but essentially I'm looking at everyone's backyard. So is that what I'm going to be looking at from now on? Is that what this paradise is now, for me. It's going to be something else. That's not going to work.
Thank you, ma'am. Someone else, anyone else? Evening.
Chris Lehman, 6566 Jefferson Street. Aside from the aesthetic purposes of this, I have significant concerns. Number one, we're increasing the number of people from, was it 17 to 19? Talk about number of cars. We already get a lot of traffic backed up through here. I don't see any fence or any kind of thing going in right here, which means somebody could park right off my driveway and walk right in their back door. And if you can tell me you can control people from doing that, then that's great. But there's absolutely nothing to keep people from parking right along our driveway. There's nothing to help with the flow of control. I've sat here waiting to get out on many a time with this four-way stop right up here, and that construction's not going to fix that. So outside of the view and forward backside of the properties, I have concerns about the traffic flow, the number of cars it's going to add to the area, and just what it does to our community in that area.
All right, thank you.
My name is Chuck Robinson, Charles Robinson Jr., 6522 Old Carolina Road, Haymarket, Virginia. It is Robinson's Paradise because my mom named it. It's Walter Robinson Lane because that's my grandfather. We wouldn't be here today talking about this if it wasn't for the Robinson family. And I go on record for all the Robinson family that we oppose this project the way it stands on the new drawing. We were okay with the original.
Excuse me, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that, please?
I said we oppose it. First of all, Robinson Paradise included not just 16 lots, but the 17th. It included 3 other lots behind my house. It included the house I live in, and it included my grandmother's house, which is the old structure that's sitting on Lot 5 of the original plan. Now they want to rezone it, and they want to cut all that out. It also included memorials and projects that was going to, in parcels that we also own, that kind of tributed the Robinson family. And I don't see any of that in there either. It's all about money. It's all about getting extra taxes, possibly even for the town of Haymarket, because now you're going to a higher density, and you're trying to put more people in there, more houses in there, and that's going to put more money in the coffers of the town of Haymarket. But what's it going to do to the folks that live there and grew up there? Have you thought about that? We represent the town of Haymarket because we grew up in Haymarket. Did any one of you guys grow up in Haymarket?
I wish I had.
I wish you had too, because you wouldn't let this project go through. Not the way it is. Not the new project. When this bridge was still up, it might take me 5 minutes to get out of my driveway. If I didn't back into my driveway, I had a hard time getting out. When the bridge reopens in the spring, it's going to be the same way. And the way this project is and increasing even more, it's going to be a nightmare. Plus everything that the other people have said about all the extra houses, all that's, I mean, Haymarket is country. And I realize it's grown. I realize it's not the way it used to be. But we don't have to add to it by going to R2 on that side of 66. What you guys have already, or not you guys, but what the town of Haymarket put the townhouses in on the other side, doesn't mean we have to do that over there. But Robinson Paradise, and if you decide to go through with it, there's no reason that what they have cut out of Robinson Paradise, all of it should be rezoned. I'm going on record saying you shouldn't approve it, but I'm saying if it's a done deal, if you guys already made your minds up, all this area that's not part of rezoning, why not? it should all be rezoned. And no reason why this should not be rezoned. It was all part of Robinson Paradise in the beginning, and it still is. Just because we didn't want to sell the parts we own, they want to cut it out and redraw it? No. And you guys shouldn't let that go that way. Did I miss anything, Tom? No, sir. Sure? You're good. So, Andy, DJ, Brandon? So how does this process work? Where does it go from this meeting here tonight? When do you guys vote on this stuff? I need to know because I'm not in town all the time.
Well, first of all, we're not going to vote tonight, so that's why we're having this hearing, for you all to voice your concerns, and we appreciate you coming, and we are listening.
Well, actions speak louder than words. If you're listening, vote no.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on this?
Follow-up, quick follow-up?
Yes, sir.
So, it's one thing to move into an area knowing that you're moving into it, you agree to it, this is what it is. When we moved into the property, my dad, all that was fields, it was just nothing there. Everybody had their own place, and we made that work. So my problem is to come in, change the zoning, and then flip it, and not take us, I mean, you guys are listening to us tonight. I mean, I get that. But what I want to be clear about is that how many people are going to want to move in to an area where you know your neighbor is a backyard of someone else? I would say that everyone sitting here tonight, given that same opportunity, would say no. If you don't want it for you, then you can't want it for me. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on it? All right, well, we will close the public hearing. I appreciate you all coming. Okay, announcements. Any announcements from the commission?
Mr. Chair, if you'll allow, I'd like to make announcements at the end of the meeting, please.
Yes, sir. Anyone else? All right, announcements closed. ARB and Town Council update. Do we have an update from the ARB?
Yes, sir. In the August 19th meeting, they accepted an application for a shed on Fayette Street. The very thing ended up put in an application to have its doors painted black. That was accepted and has now already been completed. 14881 Washington Street had put in an application to demo the property. We did a small adjustment to condition within that application to only demolish the single-story structure on the back that was put on as an addition, also to weatherproof for exposure after they removed that addition, and to document and picture the rear before removal. Sheets came in and put up a application to put in for their light fixtures, and those were all accepted.
All right, thank you. Any questions on that?
Are the light fixtures that Sheets is putting in very different from the current ones?
No, ma'am. They are LED fixtures to be more energy saving, as well as they project more on just the parking lot, and they have designed them to make sure to where if you were to look at CVS's per se, where they just shine all over the place, these were just to make sure they stay within sheets. They also went ahead and changed, they're going to be sitting on top of a 3-foot concrete square structure that I believe they're going to be putting stone around. Is that correct, Marchant? Stone. It is to be go around those to class it up per se a little bit.
Correct. And just to correct, just to verify,
Please.
confirm that they wanted to go with a lesser type of fixture. In other words, if you see the new lights that are in the Food Line parking lot, they're very small, very sheer, and again, as you suggested, they reduce light trespass. They will be installing additional lamps along Washington Street. Those will match the current streetscape lighting that's along there. And then they'll be doing recessed LED lighting within the canopy when that's replaced.
All right, any other questions for the ARB update? All right, as far as the town council update at our last meeting, just a couple things. It was brought to our attention that there's a possibility that the Old Carolina Bridge could be opening earlier than the spring of 2016. There's a possibility it could open this fall. They're slightly ahead of schedule from what I understand. So that would be a good thing to get that open back up, I think, for the town. It was also brought to our attention that there's 167 businesses currently in town, and 15 of those have been here 20 years or longer, which I think speaks well of the town and its relationship with businesses. And then the last thing I want to bring up, the Harover property. The town council has heard the recommendations from the PC, and we are doing a matrix to, each councilman is doing a matrix, and we're going to revisit that the next town council meeting. We took those 3 drawings that we saw and that we had spoken about last time, were kind of less is more, keeping more green space for the town. So just so you all know, we are moving on that. And as soon as we compile that data, then we're going to go back to Sympoetica, and they're going to come up with a conceptual drawing. It's my understanding it will come back to us as the PC. We'll review it and then go back up. So just so you know, it is in the works, and the council's appreciative of the work that you all have been doing. Any questions on that? All right. Yes, ma'am.
Just one clarification on the Old Carolina Bridge. It is the goal of VDOT to have it open by the end of the year, not necessarily in the fall, but by the end of the year. And what they would do is not have everything done, but at least enough to have traffic on it, and then finish the rest of the work under traffic. Things like putting on some of the decorative finishes, the street lights and stuff like that. So I just want to make that clarification.
All right. But you will be able to drive over 66 without getting hit, correct?
That's their goal, is to
Okay.
have it done
All right.
instead of by the spring, to have it open to traffic by the end of the year, if not sooner.
Right. And I think everybody would benefit from that.
And there's been a lot of requests, including from the town, but citizens request, everybody wants that bridge open before they start doing a lot of work on Route 15.
Right. Kind of like what they did at the interchange out here at 29 and 55, where they opened it and they were still in the process of doing work, kind of along that line.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, any questions on those items? All right, seeing none, we will move on. Any new business before we tackle the old business? And we have a pretty good agenda tonight. All right, and we will close that. All right, old business, special use permit, in-home business. It's been brought to our attention that it's recommended that we pass this.
Haven't we already voted on that?
Yes, we did. Thank you. All right, moving on to this Robinson's Paradise rezoning. I I think, given what we've heard tonight, I would like to recommend that we table this to the next meeting, and in the meantime, we give the applicant a chance to respond to the neighbors' comments. Is there any thought on that?
Mr. Chair, I've got considerable additional issues for the applicant to consider,
Okay.
above and beyond simply those that have been raised by the public. Marchant, I've looked at this thing over and over again, and perhaps it's just me being old school and being used to things being done in a certain way, but I don't see a specific request for an SUP for the driveway. I don't see a separate document with a separate document ID number and a separate set of facts setting that out. I see references to it, but I don't see the, I mean, maybe it's just not in my packet or my electronic one, but I don't see an actual application with signatures and such and justification.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Weir, if you could point, Commissioner Weir, page 3 of the plan set references a special use permit plan.
That's not a separate document. That's simply a request. I'm looking for an application.
You're actually looking for the physical permit application?
Correct.
Okay. The physical application, I can get that for you. What we did include, these are 3 or 4 applications tracking it once. The narrative includes the description of the SUP. We have a separate plan set in the plan document, so I apologize if that was part of the confusion, but they were all meant to track together as one cohesive document rather than tracking separately.
You understand my concern that we'll have to vote on each one separately?
Understood.
Okay.
The idea was to be somewhat efficient with the review.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure that efficiency really is the best course in this particular instance. With regard to that SUP for the, I guess what's deemed a shared driveway, I'm kind of concerned, or I'm actually curious, how it's being justified as a shared driveway and not a pipe stem.
We define pipe stem, or we list pipe stem and shared access or shared driveways as 2 separate activities. It's described one way in the R1, it's described another way in the R2. They have many similar components, but that is a nuance to our particular ordinance where they're described 2 different ways.
Given that there's no definition of either in the ordinance, I'm giving it the common and usual definition. A shared driveway is generally a driveway that occupies a parcel or a portion of 2 parcels between, generally on the boundary line or incorporating the boundary line of 2 parcels, so that it serves 2 parcels with road frontage, correct? And I would
understand your explanation.
And I would point to Haymarket Crossing as an example of what my view of what a shared driveway is. The common and ordinary definition for a pipe stem is generally that of a strip of land connecting lots to a public street that is owned and maintained by owners. And in this particular case, it's a strip of land that is bordered on both sides of the driveway by the lots of others not being served by that. So I would consider this, quite frankly, a pipe stem and not a shared driveway. And as you've noted, pipe stems are allowable in the R1, but they are not allowable in the R2. And as this is not a shared driveway by definition, but rather a pipe stem, I question how we can even consider allowing the special use for a special use permit for a special use that's not permitted. I mean, it would seem to me that the only option available to the Planning Commission, given that it doesn't fit the definition of a shared driveway, would be to entertain a motion to deny the SUP for not fitting the definitions in the R2. And if that's the case, how does that impact all of the other motions that will have to be made with regard to not only the rezoning but the comp plan amendment? I mean, I can't at this point see any way that you could justify this as a shared driveway and not a pipe stem, given the common definitions and what's in the code. So I'm going to have an issue on that particular one, and perhaps you need to get with the property owner and figure out how you wish to address that. Getting to the issue of that was raised by some of the residents with regard to their views and the adjoining uses that will be built on this property if the rezoning is adopted. I I tend to kind of agree with them. I mean, they're existing on R1 lots, you're sticking an R2 lot across the street from them, or actually across the driveway from them. I mean, to me, this is sort of, you know, I had property in Chantilly, and this is classic infill development. It's classic infill development at the highest density possible. I don't find it particularly compatible with the existing uses, both on the south and the north side of the development. And I'm kind of looking at this puzzle piece shape of the development, where you've got a huge gap between Lot 7 and Lot 8, incorporated by a parcel that's not part of the rezoning, and I question how the sidewalk's going to work there as well, and then property that's not addressed on the other side of the new road. I understand that the part of the justification is the manner in which the county has potentially rezoned or given long-range land use status to the parcels to the north in the county. But I've been up here long enough to recall when these comp plan amendments were made, when the decisions were made as to make this R1 and retain it as R1 most recently, and that had a lot to do with the original the original long-range land use plan of the county at the time, which is now significantly different. And I can't justify a rezoning to be compatible with the ever-changing long-range land use plan of the county over the interests of the current residents that will also boundary it. I mean, I sort of give deference to them because that's who we're supposed to be representing, not the county's interests. I also have an issue with the dual access points that this is going to create on Old Carolina Road, both for the current driveway and for Walter Robinson's Lane. I'd like a little more information on the sidewalk between lots 7 and 8. You know, one other thing, looking at the applicant's response and the notation regarding the power line issue, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion on the power line. Overhead route, underground route, who's going to be impacted, who's not impacted, not in my backyard, put it in his, you know, the whole 9 yards, whether it's going down Route 15 or it's coming through Haymarket or going down Route 66. And I've noted the comment that the applicant makes about how the power line would make it difficult for them or perhaps create an insurmountable problem for this plan, and I understand that. But from the standpoint of the Planning Commission, I guess it comes down to a similar question that I just asked. Whose interest do we represent? Who do we consider? I mean, do we consider the current residents that have issues with the potential of a power line going through their areas? And do we take this particular route off the map because this undeveloped, currently vacant property wants to be developed? I mean, whose interests do we really represent up here? I mean, what do we consider? I mean, I could go on ad nauseum. I'll allow the others to address it, but those are just some of the issues I've got at this point, at this preliminary point with this plan.
So, Commissioner Weir, you were looking for the actual SUP application. You were questioning the use of the driveway to the two units.
I'm looking for a justification of it as a shared driveway and not a pipe stem.
Versus a pipe stem, okay. You're also looking at the sidewalk issue between the lots on the south side of Walter Robinson at the entrance to the development?
The road frontage on the road from, that encompasses the area between Lot 7 and Lot 8, directly in front of the area that's not part of the rezoning.
If I may, there's a full-width sidewalk.
There is a full-width sidewalk all the way across with no curb cut?
He does show a curb cut, and he does show water and sanitary connection to that property as well.
Okay. You can take that one off your list.
Okay. And then you had some general comment about the
I just have
public
general
comments that are
concerns.
here tonight, and then the Dominion. I would agree that in either case, whether it's developed under this scenario or a different scenario, all lot owners in that area would be impacted by that route. And then, okay, any other questions on that one?
I
Commissioner
have a
Weir?
couple of points I would just like to have clarified for my benefit, too. I thought in reading, Mike, what you offered about the power line, that you gave us far more power than we have. In order to tell Dominion Power where to put their lines would be wonderful, but we can't do it. Secondly, the point back in June, I believe it was, when we first addressed this, that I was concerned about was parking. I know you said that there were 5 places available for just about every one of these houses. Is there on-street parking available at any place in this development?
Not with the section that we have, it's a 24-foot section. The section that we have is a 24-foot paving section, face-to-face of curb, and that does not allow for on-street parking, so it wouldn't be allowed in this circumstance. And that's one of the reasons why we put so many parking spaces on each lot, was to accommodate the lots outside of that.
I appreciate that, but living in Haymarket Station where parking is always a problem, we could say we have at least 4 places. But the real problem is, where do the on-street parkers park? And it's a headache. It's just an absolute headache. If you had originally 16 homes versus 26 homes, it would seem to me that some accommodation for on-street parking might be available in that setup. With 26, it seems practically impossible.
Right. There may be an opportunity for us to accommodate on-street parking also. So I would not say that we're,
Ruled
stuck
it out
on-
completely.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not ruling it out.
Yes.
Let me ask real quick, what is the current accommodation for traffic going in and out and onto Jefferson Street from Robinson's Paradise?
For,
Just general traffic management for people getting in and people getting out.
there's typical signage that you'd find on any, development.
Is it just stop signs? Is it a light? Is it
Yeah.
just a stop
regular
sign?
signs, yeah.
Okay.
VDOT is very hesitant to give lights in even way more traffic areas than this would be. I did a project on Prince William Parkway where you think they would want a light, and they said no. So they're very hesitant, especially here. The VPDs that are coming out of here is, with 26 lots, it's about 260 vehicles per day. That sounds like a lot, but in VDOT's world, that's not. That's something that they wouldn't consider a light for this.
Right, because it'd have to be a little more traffic for them
Yeah,
to
they-
justify a light. I know, I understand.
Yeah, they want thousands of VPDs before they would consider something like that.
Yeah. And just, and thank you, just as a general comment for the board, I live in an R2 neighborhood that was built starting in 2012. Right across 66, I live in Sherwood Forest. I chose to move here into an R2 development. I had several neighbors, probably 4 or 5 that still live on Fayette Street, who were probably very discriminative against us moving in for the first year and a half. And it took us almost 2 years to, quote unquote, get along with each other. And they were nice, folk, of course, but, the impact it has on, their lifestyle, what they were used to with all the tree lines back there beforehand. This is a little more different because not only are you looking in the backs of people's yards, you're also dealing with a sound wall that's going to be built. You're dealing with the same amount of traffic that I deal with today on Fayette Street. And depending on peak times and so forth, getting onto Washington Street from Fayette going southbound is a nightmare on weekdays, weekday evenings, most weekends, especially during town functions. But in terms of lifestyle, I don't think we should develop every single lot as an R1 or R2, and it should really be based on the traffic volume, the needs of the people who have lived here, who have contributed, not discounting people that do want to come in as well and try to develop and make, the town, better. But let's not do it without, sacrificing what these people have dealt with for the past, year or so with these new plans coming in. I'm still looking at some of the old plans as well. I do have some concerns with the R2s as much as Commissioner Weir does as well. So my general comment is I would like to vote on this today if possible, and regardless of the outcome, if there's a yes vote, we'd have to move forward. If there's a no vote, we'd ask the developer to maybe, reconsider the R2 and how it's appropriate and how it's going to be planned and help address some of the major concerns that haven't been taken care of. The pipe stem versus the shared driveway?
Correct.
Yeah. And I don't see how all those vehicles could still fit in that neighborhood with the proposed plan. I just don't see it. There's going to be a lot of conflicts, a lot of issues. Mr. Robinson, you talked about, having to wait to get out of your neighborhood at times, and you had to kind of face forward to be able to get out on Jefferson Street. I empathize with that completely, and I think if you can't get out of your house now, what's adding, 70-plus vehicles to your daily, commute outside your neighborhood and back in? Sure, come on up.
I'd just like to expand on what you were saying. Those numbers are inaccurate. I mean, you might add whatever you said, 260, but what you guys don't understand is people cut through from 15 across Heathcote, Old Carolina, get through the town. Maybe they're even headed to 29. They'll cut through Old Carolina Road. The number of traffic when the bridge is open on our side is a lot worse without all the extra building and housing going R2. I mean, like Tommy said, the R1, I mean, okay, that's a strip, we understand that was there. It's not like we don't expect any houses to be built on the land of the project. But today they expanded to R2 and add 10 more and just cram it all in there, and then to cut out, basically just to cut this out. The traffic is horrendous, but a lot of it's not the local that's living here, it's the cut-through traffic. Because you know how the nightmare it is on 15, getting across 66, 8, and 29. You can't even, when you get to the light at Heathcote 15, when the light turns green, there's nowhere you can go. Traffic's already backing up in that area.
And to the point, with 4 lanes going down Jefferson to the bridge, we're supposed to convert down to a 2-lane highway instead of 4. When I moved here from Haymarket, I had to cross a 4-lane highway without a light to get out of my neighborhood. It was difficult with 20 neighbors. I can't imagine having that many cars going through. So the access to and from the current plan that's in place right now, in my personal professional opinion, is that it's too condensed. It needs to be looked at and revisited and addressed properly.
I guess if I could.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Make a comment.
Go ahead.
What we would like to do is to have the opportunity to take the comments that we've received and address them and see if we can come to accommodations on them and mitigate the issues, as opposed to getting an up or down vote tonight.
Well,
we would like to have that opportunity.
We're not going to vote tonight. We're going to table it, so you don't have to worry about an up or down vote. I think.
We haven't moved it yet, but we still have to move to table it if we're going to move it to the next month.
I understand. I think that it would behoove you to take these citizen inputs, go back, reevaluate what you're doing with the, I know you've already made some concessions with the turning radius, the on-street parking. I mean, having gone through this town when Gossam's store, I was a kid 30 years ago, living in this town for 20 years. I mean, progress is here, but we do need to be mindful of the people who moved out here. Their way of life has been, shall we say, changed. Started with Dominion Valley when you used to be able to hunt out there, and now it's wall-to-wall homes. I mean, we could go on and on. I guess I have a question, and I heard a lot from the citizens about, getting in and out. I heard a lot of passion about staring in the back of people's homes. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways I had. They all alluded to that.
I would, if I could address that just
Sure.
briefly. Whether this goes as a by right use or what we're proposing, there will be homes that will be facing, they'll be looking into the backs of homes. It's the way that this is the original plan that's been platted. And if you see where this road is already platted here, and then there was Pipestem that came and served 3 lots here. And this road splits down the middle. There are lots to the north that already exist. That's not part of the rezoning. The reason for that is because my client doesn't own that property, so he can't submit a rezoning on something that he doesn't own. But there's existing lots, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 lots that's along this road on the south side. So they're already platted, and they exist. So there'll be a few more, but not appreciably more, under our plan. So that kind of eliminating those is probably not possible, because they already exist.
All right, anything else you'd like to add?
No, not unless there's specific questions.
Any more questions from the commission? Yes, sir.
Much as I would love to actually go with an up or down vote tonight, it's not the prudent thing. Because with it would come consequences. To me, the initial threshold question regards that pipe stem. I mean, the last thing that I want to see this board do or the town council do is approve a use that's not, that arguably isn't provided for, which would conceivably initiate a BZA filing and the application of their standard to our or to the town council's decision. And I don't think that's particularly in anybody's interest, given the way that this thing is designed. By the same token, a nay vote on it throws the applicant back to ground zero, in essence, or potentially throws the applicant back to ground zero. I see fundamental problems with the design of this subdivision. I see fundamental problems that I'm having a hard time coming up with any sort of reasonable manner to address. That being said, we're under a timeline. Marchant, when do we have to take action on this? Bearing in mind that it was referred to us when?
There's not an ordinance. I'll have to.
Statutory requirement.
You have 365 days, but that can be extended by the permission of the applicant.
Is it 365 for the town council or for us? I believe we're under a stricter.
Well, it's 365 for the governing body.
But we're under a more strict requirement to take action?
Correct, but it's certainly, the applicant has the ability to extend that decision deadline if
and the question is, when does that decision deadline end officially?
I don't have the math in front of me. I could get it for you.
Would you please get that? Once that's determined, this body's going to have to make a determination as to what they want to do. If there's enough time, you can defer it to the next month, and there may very well be that amount of time. If there's not, I would suggest we seek a deferral from the applicant. The last thing I want to see this body do is get into a position where we've missed our statutory deadlines or our ordinance deadlines, in which case our voice is effectively silenced. That being said, to the applicant, I would strongly recommend you revisit the entire design, because judging from the comments that I'm hearing tonight and the particular concerns that I've got, I don't, at least in my personal view, I don't see that there's any way that I could vote for this, either for the rezoning, the comp plan, or the SUP. My concerns are that deep.
If I could say, many of the things we heard tonight, we have not heard before tonight. So we didn't know these issues existed, so now we do. And it would give, I want to have the opportunity to digest them and see, where we can work with the people that are around us, with staff, address your concerns, and, come back with a plan that hopefully everybody can support.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, Marchant, I'll save you the trouble. It's at 15.22259 of the state code. Except as otherwise provided in subdivisions 2 and 3, the local planning commission or other agent shall act on any proposed plat within 60 days after it has been officially submitted for approval, either approving or disapproving the plat in writing, and given the latter specific reasons therefore, the commissioner or agent shall thoroughly review, blah, 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 blah.
But I believe it has the discretion of the applicant to extend that deadline.
And we don't have that discretion at this point, is what I'm saying.
Let me, in my experience, the 60 days has applicable to plan amendments and other types of amendments. I'm not doubting you. It sounds like the applicant for right now is agreeing to extend this. This is the first night of your public hearing. Although it's been on your agenda, this is the first night of the hearing. I think you're safe to say right now, with the applicant agreeing to take some time, you're okay. And I can go and do some more specific research on that particular case.
Make sure it's of record.
I think too, sir, I mean, I understand maybe the first time audibly you've heard these concerns, but foreseeability, if you were one of those homeowners and you're designing that project, and you were designing it with your home being abutted by 66 and now all this, I think there is a sense in which, you know, there's some things that definitely need to be reconsidered.
Yes, and as I'm standing here, things are going through my head about how to mitigate some of these things, and one thing that pops out immediately is what's already platted doesn't have any buffers. So when they're looking at those houses, they're looking right into the back. There's no 10-foot buffer. There's no fencing required or anything of that nature. It's all by right. Where I think maybe there's room for, I guess, negotiating and coming up with a solution is we can provide, additional buffering, fencing, other things that mitigate that, and so they don't look into the back of the house. And that's one of the things here. We do have this perimeter buffer with R2 that we have to put in. It's a requirement,
right?
And we can't get away from it. So that could be the way we deal with that. I don't know if it will be.
Right. I don't think that decision has to be made tonight. I think at this point, does any other member of the commission have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. That is, we've seen the people come out for a public hearing. When we discuss this again, will we have another public hearing when we get a new plan from you? Are we going back to the drawing board with a new plan that will basically require more input from the public as well?
Well, I would suggest you need to give that direction this evening, and I was going to ask the chairman to go through a couple other topics that you had raised before. So if there's feedback you wish to give on design, density, anything else like that, certainly give that tonight, and whatever the applicant chooses to do. If they choose to change or submit, we'll look at that to see if it technically requires another public hearing. If that's the case, we'll certainly let you know. Typically, if it comes back to you less intense, it's going to sound very bureaucratic. But typically, if it's less intense, it doesn't have to go back to hearing. But we can make that determination once you give your feedback. They respond for the next meeting, and we can go from there.
Mr. Weir, what's your sense on him going back, doing some major revisions, and then bringing this back for public comment?
If it were my decision alone, that's not. It's this body's decision. If there are going to be substantive changes made, and I mean significant substantive changes made to the plan, I would most certainly schedule another public hearing. I'm not a big fan of tabling things. Tabling tends to leave things on the table for far too long. I'm more of a fan of date certain actions. So I would strongly suggest, and if the chairman is willing to recognize it, I would move that we defer the SUP rezoning application and comp plan amendment for Robinson's Paradise for the meeting scheduled for October 12, 2015.
I second that.
All right, any discussion?
I think that's a wise thing to do.
I do have a couple of items I need the direction on from the commission before you take the vote, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Weir, do you need to finish that vote first, or can I go ahead and?
I'm willing to defer.
Okay. Well, if you can, what's that? October 13th?
All day.
Oh, sorry.
All right,
Told
sir.
me the 12th.
I would like to ask one other thing, is that all the citizens that are here tonight, if they could maybe coordinate with Marchant to give, contact information, so that, we can reach out to them and, discuss their concerns, and meet with them.
All right, I'll leave that up to the individual citizens to reach out to them. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
So it sounds like the general consensus of the commission is that they look at possibly a lower density. Is that generally the consensus?
Yes.
Okay. Very well.
Yes, and with on-street parking, adequate
On-street
on-street
parking?
parking.
Okay.
And a real look at that pipe stem, the shared driveway, which has never been successful in Haymarket Station.
Also, too, we provided you the Dominion power that you had requested. Last month, you talked about the issue of the fire marshal having concern about the turning radius on the second or lower cul-de-sac. The applicant has agreed to widen that to accommodate his concerns. So from a staff perspective, that particular issue is addressed. Also, Holly's about to kick me under the table. And then the third item relates to the proffer amounts. You remember last month you put forward the analysis to the council. They're asking to pay for only those units above the by right density, which is equivalent to 10 units. And at the current analysis amount, that's $38,000 per unit, which would be approximately $380,000 for all the development. So we'd look for your feedback on that particular issue. But Holly, you had a...
Just two things. Regarding the fire marshal and the cul-de-sac, the applicant met with the fire marshal and made revisions per discussions he had with them. The town has not independently confirmed that it's acceptable to the fire marshal. He just recently did the revision. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that in an October date for a vote on this, if he is making substantial changes on this, that will not give staff time to review those changes and approve them, and assuming there's no comments.
The motion was simply to defer the matter, not to defer a vote.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. If there's substantial changes, there's a review time to make sure everything's okay as well.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion to defer. We have a second. Any more discussion? To defer it to our regularly scheduled meeting on October 13. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, it's deferred to the October 13th meeting. All right, next item is review the PC bylaws. Each one of you have the new updated, the one in your packet where the town's attorney has gone through and made some revisions. What I would like to do, and since we just got this tonight and none of us have had the opportunity to go through the updated update, if you will, if there's no objection, I think it would be good if we had a special meeting 1 hour prior to the regular scheduled 7 o'clock on the 13th to give all of us time to go through it, look it over, especially in light of the sign ordinance we have to do, which is going to take some time. So are there any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, I recommend we probably reconvene sometime later this month just to make sure it's all taken out of the way. With the planning packets getting bigger and bigger each month,
right,
it's probably going to be a long day for some of us, probably including myself. So my recommendation, and if other people agree as well, is to have this on, let me look at my calendar, my trusty iPhone calendar, is to look at sometime the week of the 28th of September. So either between September 28th and October 2nd. That gives about 2 weeks to take a look at all the changes with the bylaws and, address it head on and not be distracted by other agenda items that we need to put more focus on as well.
I mean, I would agree that it's going to take some time. There's a lot here. We want to get it right. What are everybody checking your calendars? What is...
I'm out of town the 20th and 29th because I'm going down to Norfolk for the PC Planning Commission seminar. But I come back on that 29th.
What does Friday, October? We have a town council meeting on Thursday the 1st. at 7. What does Friday, the 2nd of October, look like?
That's fine.
Would that work?
So would that be at 6 or 7?
And then if we get it all done on that day, awesome. If we have to carry a few small pieces to the next meeting, we can be done with it by then.
I guess my question is, could we meet at, say, 4 or 5 with your work schedule where we're not here till 10 o'clock at night, or?
I work from home.
That's cutting it close.
Okay,
We're coming back from Massachusetts.
okay.
Or could we move it up to I know you meet on the 5th, the 6th, perhaps?
To the 6th. And what does everybody look like for the 6th?
I'm good.
I mean, the 6th would work for me.
That would be-
Mr. Chairman, this is for the discussion of the PC bylaws?
Correct.
Special session for discussion.
So if let's say on Tuesday, the 6th, we want it
Yeah,
4:30. Could everybody make it at 4:30?
yes.
We could do that.
Maddox, can you make it?
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and schedule a special meeting of the PC for Tuesday, September 6th at 4:30.
October?
I'm sorry, October. Too many dates here. At 4:30 to discuss the review of the bylaws. And if during that time, if everybody could look it over, come prepared. What I would like to do to conserve time is come with your comments typed out in bullet points so we stay on track. Something like this could get pretty cumbersome if we don't. So if you could just make your main points, and obviously if something arises at that meeting that a concern somebody brings up, I don't want to preclude discussion, but kind of summarize, if you will, if that's all right. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
All right, so if we could schedule for the,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I will not be at that meeting, but I would just forward a personal comment on this.
Okay.
It's not really my way, but I am going to on this particular issue. I'm approaching this with a rather cynical view, given the timing. Given the timing and the content, I'm taking a very, very cynical view of this, and while I agree with many of the components of the revision, I strongly disagree with a variety of other ones, and I would suggest that interested members of the Planning Commission review the bylaws of other jurisdictions which incorporate much the same language that we do. I did a little bit of research on that this morning, and I stopped counting when I got to 10. I looked at Orange County, Essex County, Loudoun County, Frederick County, Spotsylvania County, the towns of Percival, South Boston, Leesburg, Gordonsville, and the city of Williamsburg, and it's amazing how very similar, if not identical, their bylaws are to our very own as they currently exist. And I'm kind of curious as to the genesis and the cost of this process and where it initiated from, because I don't recall anybody ever asking. I know that it's been reviewed in the past, but this is one of these things that sort of sticks in my craw, and like I say, I'm very cynical about how this appeared on the agenda and what the genesis of it was, given that we just readopted the bylaws last month. And if that, will you excuse me for a moment? I'll be back in about 5 minutes. What's the next item?
I was going to suggest a break, Mr. Chairman, before, while Milt gets caught up.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. Okay. Right. Okay. Respect everybody's time.
Sorry.
All right, ma'am, let me know when we're up.
We deliberately did not color coordinate, by the way. Mike Johnson and I were wearing the same colors.
We're still wearing summer
All
colors.
right, ready? All right, let's call the meeting back to order. At this time, if we could move on to the signed ordinance presentation from the consultant.
Sure. While he's getting set up, I do have one comment to make on the bylaws. something that Martin Krim did bring to our direction is he had provided revisions probably about 6 or 7 months ago when the commission previously looked at this. And we inadvertently did not include that with it. So a lot of these edits were edits already made by the attorney, which we had failed to bring forward to you before. So our apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. It's nice to be back with you to discuss signs. I'm Milton Hurd. I'm on the EPR team that's been working on this project. And if it's okay with you, I have about a 30-minute presentation that will go through all the major features of how we got here and the contents of the draft, and then we can have a question and discussion period if that suits the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to leave at 8:45. I've got a commitment I've got to make up. Would you mind me? I just have one issue that I want to make sure it gets on the table. Under former Section 58-346 special use signs, there's a note that's been appended. I guess I'm directing this more at legal counsel than I am at the consultant. But there's a note in there that's in red type. It says, "Note, churches should not be singled out for unique treatment in order to avoid any potential issues with the First Amendment considerations of the federal RLUIPA statute. Signs for churches are placed within the broader category, blah, 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 blah." I have a concern with a note that singles out, and I understand the purpose for it, but I have a problem with incorporating a note regarding the singling out for unique treatment of one particular class of entity to the exclusion of similar notes regarding enforcement on other entities. And I just don't, I mean, again, I understand why it's there. I just don't believe, it should be there. I mean, I think it's one of those things that might create more issues than it solves. I think that, equal enforcement across the board is the standard that we should be applying, and not setting forth any special, what might be construed as a special consideration for one type of entity over another. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, sir.
Great. Well, thank you, commissioners. First of all, we have a team here. As you well know, EPR is...
Excuse me, sir. Is there any way we can increase his volume? I don't know if anybody else, but I'm having a little difficult. Okay. I know I'm getting older.
I'll hold it up.
Thank you. That's awesome.
There we go. Sorry.
Thank you.
We have a team on this project led by EPR. Bill Lynch is the team leader. He's an engineer. And with him are 3 planners. That includes me, Milt Hurd, Barry Carpenter, a landscape architect, and Matthew Rinberg. So the other 3 of us, besides Bill, have done most of the work on this part of the project. The purpose, as you know, was to rewrite the sign regulations. And there were several sort of goals or intentions here. One was to make them simpler. One was to make them more user-friendly and understandable, easier to read and absorb, to provide for more efficient and timely and predictable administration, for them to be effective for both businesses and the public at large, and balance that tension between modern commercial enterprises and historic character. Bring them up to current industry standards where that's appropriate, bring them up to current legal standards, and that was the source of the note that Mr. Weir alluded to. And also to sort of do that balancing of the overall tension between modern business and historic character. So the scope of the work, we had 10 tasks. Well, 3 big groups of tasks. First, to analyze the current sign regulations for issues, and that included meetings and communications with key stakeholders, conducting best practices research of surrounding jurisdictions and model ordinances across the nation, and then preparing recommendations to solve those issues as best we can. And those three sort of groups of effort broke down into 10 discrete work tasks. First, we had a kickoff meeting with the town staff and planning commission back in December. During that visit, we also met with stakeholders, both individually and as a group of most interested people. And then also during that trip, we conducted a field inventory, a tour of the town, documentation of existing conditions and the like. Then we went back and reviewed the existing ordinance, analyzed it in light of what we'd heard, what we know, and then followed that with conducting the research of the neighboring jurisdictions and other literature. Then we prepared the draft ordinance, which you have before you. We finished that in May, late May. We also, during that period, right before we finished that draft, we met with you again for the second time for a briefing. And now we're meeting with Task 10, we're meeting with you again. The two remaining tasks are Task 7, which was to prepare illustrations and graphics, photo images to show definitions, sign types, and the like. We're holding that back because that's sort of a product that comes at the end when we really know what all the content is. So we're waiting on that. And then the other thing is to then follow through after this meeting and get your input and prepare a final draft ordinance with the illustrations. So key input that we heard. And of course, we have pages of notes from our meetings, but these are sort of the highlights, the sort of key points that drove our work. One was the lack of visual identity at the town's entry points. And actually, that doesn't really get translated so much into the code as it is a separate policy question. But we heard it loud and clear from stakeholders, particularly with regard to the western entrance. A lack of identification for industrial sites on Route 15, particularly those uses that are sort of set back and they're on their own parcels, so they can't get signs readily out front. The need for better sign visibility for multi-tenant buildings in commercial areas, we heard that a lot, particularly, again, for those that are set back deeper into the property. We heard some desire for larger and painted wall signs like murals. We heard some desire for internally illuminated and generally larger signs as well, simply to be more easily read and identified. We also heard concerns about the timeliness and predictability of the approval process, which we knew going in. We heard testimony about that. And again, that overall tension between visibility for modern uses and preserving historic character. It's a balancing act, and that sort of emerges all through this work. So here are some examples that you're all familiar with. The menu signs up front, question about how large those are. We heard issues about the size of letter signs. Maybe they're too small. Here's one that was interested in larger and maybe internal illumination. Again, wall signs for multiple tenants, not readable enough from the sidewalk and street. So those are just sort of examples of some of the things. Then we conducted our research and analysis. We did the field inventory for documentation. We reviewed and analyzed your existing sign regs and your comp plan policies. And then we conducted best practices research, which included an examination of the sign regulations for Warrenton, Leesburg, Fauquier County, Middleburg, Manassas, and Prince William County, as well as a model sign code created by the U.S. Sign Council, an evidence-based model sign code by Urban Design Associates and the University of Florida, and a guide to municipal sign regulation by the Georgia Municipal Association. With all those, we created a table that compared all the major features and all the sign types and the standards for them. It's a multiple-page table for comparative purposes. So the key issues then that emerged from all that, one, there's some overarching issues, and those are the balancing the needs, like I mentioned, and simplifying the ordinance, because it is actually rather cumbersome, as you know, and in places difficult to understand. The permitting process and administration, streamlining that, or at least making it predictable and fair. Defining location standards that are easily understood and consistent with your comprehensive plan, where signs are allowed to go. And that's very complicated because you have different possibilities. Zoning districts, policy areas, site by site, it's complicated choices. The sign size standards, the area, the height, how you calculate it, et cetera. Sign types, freestanding, wall signs, et cetera. And then legal issues. One was what Mr. Weir mentioned, the RLUIPA statute. There are several others I'll touch on. If we want to get into detail, we can call on the town attorney. Nonconformities and variances, you've had some ongoing issues with those. And definitions, updating them, consolidating them, and ultimately they need to be integrated with the other definitions in your zoning code. And then the organization of the regulations. We've suggested a restructuring that we think is a little bit more easy to understand and more logical. And then there was a new issue that emerged. It's a legal issue, the Gilbert or Reed decision which was issued by the Supreme Court a month after we finished this draft, but actually a lot of it we tackled because it hinges on the First Amendment issue, and we already knew that coming in. Gilbert takes it maybe a step farther, but it's the same issue. And we've tackled that in the draft and created some language that we included in the draft as a fallback if we wanted to get even tighter on that and give more protection to that concern. So I think we're in good shape there. Again, we can talk about that more with the town attorney. So I'll go through some of the...
Can you hold on a moment?
Yeah.
With the chair's permission. Go back a slide. To me, based on Gilbert, and counsel might disagree, I think there's actually an 11th key issue, and it may be the most important one of all, stemming from Gilbert, and that's enforcement. Now, all the other things are important, yes, but if you don't have equitable and even enforcement and an enforceable ordinance, then everything else is for naught. And, I mean, I would actually make it key issue number 1, because if you can't enforce it, or you have no intent of enforcing it, or you have no intent or manner to enforce it equitably, nothing else matters. And I think that needs to be incorporated into the ordinance.
Good point.
Thank you. Continue, sir.
Right, good point. So I'll go through the basic recommendations on these key issues, and then we can talk about them. On the overarching issues, our recommendations are to constantly struggle with the balance between the historic and modern needs, and we've tried to do that, and you'll see that emerge when I go through some of the suggested standards. And again, trying to keep it simple and user-friendly as much as possible. We've done some things in that regard, like trying to put as much of the standards in tables as opposed to text, for example. So, you know, we also, you know, looking at that approach, we suggest maintaining the ARB review and refining the sign regs to provide better visibility to the extent that that's, you know, still compatible with historic character, and tailoring the sign regs to address all the key issues. You have an opportunity here, it's very interesting, because you're a small town, to sort of customize these things and make the structure so that we can address some of the key things we heard in particular areas without undermining or having an undue impact elsewhere in the town. It's very, I think you have a good situation in that regard, and I'll explain a little bit more of that as we go forward. So for the overarching issues, I think we have a pretty good balance there. I'll get into more detail. The permitting process and administration recommendations, we're suggesting to apply the Historic District Guidelines to the ARB, but there's an alternative there, I think, and again, it would require maybe some comment from the town attorney, but the possibility of allowing the ARB to review, let the zoning administrator make decisions using the guidelines and let the ARB handle appeals. I'm not sure that actually is consistent with the statute, but it may be a way to streamline it. We also, whether or not you do that, we're suggesting that the review period for sign permits clarify a maximum day, 60-day review period for ARB action, but that applications be heard at the next meeting of the ARB after a 2-week period for staff processing. That means that approval would typically happen in less than 45 days, which is pretty reasonable in my judgment, but again, you may be able to be more aggressive if you took option B. For location standards, our recommendations include applying sign standards by the zoning districts and land uses, sort of a combination. And that would include creating a new component to the zoning map, which would be called sign map areas. And those would be based upon your comprehensive plan policy areas. And then that would be overlaid with zoning districts. So that way you can really get very accurate about where certain kinds of sign standards apply in relationship to the kinds of uses you expect. And so you designate 3 sign map areas: gateway, core, and residential. And they match up very well to your comp plan land uses for future land use in your comprehensive plan. The gateway sign area is largely your interchange area and your industrial area. The core sign area would be the transitional commercial and neighborhood town center, And then the rest would be called residential, and that's the residential areas and the public areas for future land use. So you have three fairly simple, cohesive areas to which the sign regs would apply locationally. And then within each of those, you would also consider what zoning district they're in. So it's a very simple but orderly structure. For off-street businesses and multi-tenant buildings, we're suggesting softening the standards for off-premise signs in the industrial district and for menu signs in commercial and industrial by allowing one off-premise sign on a contiguous lot for the industrial district, and then allowing a menu sign for a building or for a site in commercial. For the number, size, and placement of signs, we would suggest allowing more than one sign per lot. In some cases, you do allow two. We're saying more than one in I1, B1, and B2, as long as the total sign area doesn't exceed the maximum for the type, the total area is limited for the district, or to an overall frontage length of the lot, so that the wider the lot, the greater the area. We would require minimum spacing of freestanding signs and limit the total number of signs by lot frontage, by business, or by site, depending on the sign type. For sign standard regulations, for the sign areas, we would recommend here in this draft to allow slightly larger sign areas in height, generally speaking. We got a lot of complaints about just the overall signs, and when we compared Haymarket's current standards with all these others, yours are very restrictive, and we understand that was the concern for the store compatibility, but you do, I think, have some ability to move up a little bit in size and still be compatible. So we're suggesting that you ease up on that a bit for both area and height by providing a 50% increase in most area limits to improve the visibility, but still protect historic character. And even in doing that, you'll be smaller and lower than most other jurisdictions. And the key here is we're suggesting you avoid using the criteria of motor vehicle speed as the dominant one. In a lot of the research we did, people were using motor vehicle speeds as the criteria for sign size and location. We don't think that's valid for y'all. You're a historic town. You are very walkable. You're working more toward walkability, so the pedestrian component for sign visibility is still very important. You also have relatively slow speeds of motor vehicles. So we're suggesting that this marginal increase is based upon balancing those two things, not simply applying some, theoretical motor vehicle speed standard. It's a pretty big idea here, I think, that's come out. And then expanding the maximum menu sign area from 32 to 48 square feet and the height from 6 to 9 for both industrial and commercial. Again, that's that marginal increase based upon still a pedestrian scale, and expanding the maximum sign area for menus per tenant in the industrial uses from 3 to 4.5 and the height from 6 to 9. For area calculation, we're recommending establishing a fixed baseline sign area and height for each sign type within each sign map area. So you've got a geographic connection to the standard. And it's a logical one based upon your planning policy, not just zoning districts. Also to allow larger menu signs for wider road frontages, and to allow the user to allocate his maximum sign area among one or more signs at his discretion. So a little bit more flexibility. We're also suggesting regulating signs by lot, sign map area, and sign type rather than by building or tenant where possible. It's a lot more stable and predictable, but there's things like wall signs and address signs which really have to be by tenant or building. Regarding inconsistent or indistinguishable letter sizes on letter signs, we're suggesting limiting letter sizes only for the signs that are only letters. So otherwise, within a normal sign that has images and the like, you wouldn't concern yourself with letter sizes. And for those that are simply letter sizes, like that example I showed, allow the marginal increase, 50% in letter size from 12 inches to 18 inches, and then in the gateway area, allow up to 2 feet if you're 100-foot setback. So again, it's that marginal increase. It's a flat standard. It's not proportional to setback necessarily, but it makes it a little bit more visible to both the pedestrian and the motor vehicle. We're also suggesting adding limits to the total sign area for letter signs, just the whole form, from 18 square feet in B1 core and 20 square feet for B2, I1, and B1 in the gateway. So again, just a little marginal increase. The presentation of size requirements in the code we're suggesting be tabular. Right now you've got a bunch of words, and it is a little bit hard to follow. So we're suggesting a table. We really have 3 tables. This first one shows the sign dimensions for lots in the B1 zoning district, and is divided into those in the core and residential areas and those in the gateway map area. So when you zoom in, here's the structure. You've got the sign dimensions for B1, and it's the B1 in the core and residential, the number, the area, the height, and then B1 in the gateway map area, number, area, and height. So it's pretty easy to follow, and it's organized so you have both zoning and comp plan policy integrated. And then Table 2 shows sign dimensions for B2 and I1 districts, B2 on the zoning map and I1. This one doesn't need a distinguishing factor of sign area because of the geography of it. But it's the same structure, number, area, height, number, area, height, and then sign types down the left-hand column. And then finally, sign dimensions for lots in the residential zoning districts. And again, since these are all in the one sign area, the residential sign area, we don't have to distinguish it, but we have all the sign types, and then you have standards for residential uses in the residential areas, for residential projects like subdivisions, rezonings, and then for non-residential uses like churches, libraries, other uses. If they're in a residential district, they have their own standards. But you're not calling out specific uses like churches in order to avoid the RLUIPA problem. So that's sort of the recommended structure. For the sign types recommendations, we heard a lot about illumination, internal versus external, and that's a real challenge for an historic area, as you know. The internal creates some concerns, regardless of the illumination level. So the options are to retain the total prohibition or to grant it sort of openly in any location, and the other is to allow it in some limited fashion by location or district or some combination. And that's what we're suggesting to you, is to allow internally illuminated freestanding signs in the industrial district, which also is within the gateway sign area, and to retain permission for neon signs for open notices with existing sign limits. Now, in light of Gilbert, if you get really rigorous, the open notice is content, so we might want to strike that. I would still say keep the neon signs, but simply keep that fairly tight area limit, and then the content doesn't matter. The painted signs was another sort of pointed issue by some stakeholders. Issue of maintenance concerns, visual impact, the size and the height, and the historic character. In some historic districts, murals are traditional. That's a judgment for you all. The other concerns still certainly would apply. Our recommendation in the draft, and again, I want to note that, to remind you, the draft is on every slide here. This is the first cut, awaiting your input and further refinement. But our recommendation in this draft is to permit painted wall signs in B1 and B2 in the gateway sign area. So they're really limited to the western side of town, but limit them to only one side, or only the side or rear walls, and limit the area coverage to not more than 15% of the total surface area of that wall. Now, either of those could be refined, particularly the number, but we did some sketches and markups, and that was our judgment that 15% was a pretty good number. But the key concept is to limit it to those 2 districts in the gateway area. And then sandwich boards or A-frames, continue to allow them with a maximum size of 12 square feet, but limit them to 1 per business or 1 per 30 linear feet. And again, I think to Mr. Weir's point, that one does rely on enforcement in particular. They all do, but that one in particular. But it still seems reasonable as a standard to shoot for. And then the visibility of letters only, mentioned this earlier, suggesting allow slightly larger signs going up from 12 to 18 inches for the letter in B1 and B2, allowing up to 24 feet of setback and adding limits of total sign area, moving out from 18 to 20 square feet with a larger setback. For temporary signs, and this, I think, are the ones that, in this case, bring in the most concerns about First Amendment, because it's typical that temporary signs are often regulated by function, which brings in the issue of content. And knowing this even before the Reed decision, we tried to squeeze out a lot of that. We didn't squeeze it all out. For instance, we still have in this draft references to realtor signs and seasonal sales and the like. We may want to squeeze those out as well. But right now, the draft suggests defining them to include many of the signs that are currently singled out for regulation, including political signs. So you'd no longer have political signs defined. They wouldn't be regulated. They would be thrown into a larger group called temporary signs. And you'd still differentiate between permitted and non-permitted signs. And we're suggesting several additions to the prohibited list, including parasails and gorilla signs, which is the people walking in the public right-of-way waving signs, and then prohibiting using parked vehicles for the purpose of violating the sign limits. There's an alternative for temporary signs that we identified in May, and it may be more relevant now with the Reed decision. But that would be, instead of listing any types of temporary signs, we would use a simple standard sign regarding the size and duration of temporary signs, but no comment about the function or the content.
I just asked one quick question.
Yes.
Going back to the car sign, does that incorporate car wraps, people that get their cars wrapped for businesses?
This is not meant for that. It's meant for where the vehicle is located.
Okay.
So that if it's parked to be clearly, and this is a tough one, I've got some language for it, but if it's parked in order to violate the ordinance by adding sign areas.
Okay.
Sometimes it's pretty obvious. In fact, I've seen cases where it's not an operable vehicle. It just looks like a vehicle, and it's parked.
Curious. I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, like a box truck with a big sign advertised, but I can think of one home that has a business wrapped. I just wondered if that'd be a car sign.
The differentiation is tricky. I think it's worth trying to do, but the idea here is that this does not regulate vehicles. It simply regulates the location of where you park one that's attempting to violate the sign.
Real quick, I think the majority of HOAs within the town do have those kind of restrictions already in place. So from your perspective, what I'm getting is maybe the 15 or 20% of town residents that don't have HOAs, what do we do about the signs on their vehicles?
If I understand this more, I think you're more pointing this more towards parking vehicles on commercial parcels.
Yes.
and business lots, and I don't disagree. I question how that's going to be enforced and by whom. And
That's a totally valid question. In fact,
I have grave concerns over that.
right. Well, it's an absolutely valid concern, and it was not intended for residential areas, so, but it is aimed at commercial, and you're exactly right, the enforcement is tricky. Even the language is tricky. We've made an attempt because we think it's a valid issue. We didn't hear about it from anyone, but I've seen it in other places, so it's based upon our experience. Whether it stays in here as we massage this draft, I don't know. It's not life or death, but I think it was important enough for us to try to get at it. In terms of the alternative for the temporary language, we have a couple of options here to show what we mean. You could throw out all the temporary signs in terms of the mention of their function or anything about content and just say they're all temporary and they can be no greater than 8 feet of area and 6 feet in height and be placed on the lot for up to X days, 90, 60, 30. That's the idea. Some language like that that's totally neutral. And I would add a time separation so that when the time runs out, then there's a period before it can be reinstated. We didn't go a lot farther on that, subject to your reaction, but that would be the most conservative and protective approach to dealing with the content issue. And then electronic message displays, EMDs. We didn't hear about this, but it's in our experience in working on these kinds of efforts that they're an issue. We don't believe they're compatible with Haymarket, and so we're suggesting you specifically preclude them from the town. You might consider an exception for something small like time and temperature or government facilities, but the cleanest thing would be to simply exclude them. And then the legal recommendations, and again, I'll touch on these because we dealt with them in detail, but I defer to the town attorney for any follow-up and any further explanation. But the First Amendment is always an issue. There's been previous litigation before Reed, and it was on our radar to eliminate or really reduce limits, content, anything about content in a sign other than directly protecting public safety. There's also the U.S. Lanham Act, which limits our ability to restrict branding elements in signs. We have a little more latitude here because of the historic review effort and that standard. The law on that, and I defer to Mike, but the law is a little bit murky on that as well. So it's just something to be sensitive to. and then the RLUIPA Act. And so we've suggested deleting all references to church or religious signs and simply include those like any other institutional use.
Can I interject for a moment with regard to the Lanham Act one? As someone who deals with it on a daily basis, it's going to become more and more of an issue, particularly as brand values continue to increase, and you've got some less than cooperative corporations when it comes to restricting use of their particular brands and logos, who will, quite frankly, fight to the death. McDonald's isn't one of them, but there are some others that are very, very pushy.
That is certainly true in my experience, and I think for the most part that will come into the biggest play with ARB when you're reviewing the actual design. Since our standards are pretty neutral, they're easier to push back on. ARB, when you get into the judgment, then it gets tough. But that's an ongoing issue the town will have to deal with. And then finally, the Reed decision. Again, it's just an extension of the First Amendment. The court was ambiguous in some ways. I mean, it was Justice Thomas wrote the opinion. It was very clear. He made an exception for public safety, but then Alito had a concurring opinion that added off-premises and seasonal sales, and so it was very confusing. And Mike can go into more detail on that. But again, it's simply trying to limit as much as possible the references to content. And the nonconformities, you have some existing nonconformities which cause inconsistency. We're suggesting, avoid variances as much as possible going forward while respecting property rights and aiming for eventual compatibility or compliance with the code as signs are replaced and updated. And then definitions, we've updated many of them and for clarity, added some. We will later add illustrations and photos further for some. And again, we want to wait till we have a nearly finished product. And ultimately, you'll want to integrate the definitions in the sign section with the main definitions you have elsewhere in your code. It should be a fairly simple matter. You might even want to relocate the sign definitions into the section 58.1. That's a choice for you all. But we have updated the ones you have regarding signs. And then the organization of the regulations, we've reorganized the structure of this section of the code, trying to group related provisions, putting definitions at the end, and of course using the tabular format. There were also 4 related planning policy issues that weren't part of our task but emerged during our research and our discussions with stakeholders that are worth mentioning just as a flag for future work of the town. One is the gateway entrance features. It's true that as you come up Route 15 and you look east to the town, it's a very subtle entrance in terms of knowing that the town of Haymarket is right there. Doing something grander and more prominent certainly merits consideration. It's a landscape architecture kind of effort probably, not just plants necessarily. It could have sign elements. There's a lot of possibilities, but it's a design project that you may want to undertake. Then the general level of street lighting came up. We think that's something you want to keep studying. It's a separate thing from signs per se, but we think maybe some of the complaint there could be handled by on-site lighting as well as actual public street lighting. And then the balance of pedestrian and motor vehicle mobility. We heard cross comments from some of the stakeholders about the priorities there. We understand that the town is trying to move to increase pedestrian mobility while still obviously accommodating motor vehicles. So it seems like you have to keep that in balance. That'll be a continual struggle, but I can say as an outsider that the trend nationwide is pedestrian and bike mobility, big time. The winning communities that are on the forefront of economic development are doing that. You guys are there, and I wouldn't want to suggest that you should back off from that. And then finally, business promotion. We heard some sort of complaints about what the town is or isn't doing. That's more, we know the town's sensitive to that and is working on things. So that's just a sort of another flag of, keep that in mind with this project, but also all your planning policy, just to make sure people appreciate your efforts there. The next steps here then are to get your all's feedback tonight and then prepare the draft illustrations, which will include photos of sign types, definitions, and standards, and then prepare revisions to this draft and submit a revised set of regulations to you.
it was recommended, Mr. Vanderpool, would you like to come up? It was recommended that, by the town's attorney, that we enter into closed session to discuss this because of some of the latest court cases.
We could say that. We're almost there now.
So, if you don't mind, and it's appropriate that he could come in. How about Marchand as the town planner? Can he
Yes,
come in?
you can invite, actually, you could invite everyone that's here. If you choose to do so, it's your determination as to who would be appropriate for the executive session. So you can specifically invite anyone who's here or disinvite anyone who is here.
Well, I think the town's attorneys, obviously, Marchand, to make it pure, we'll leave one of the councilmen out because the council's going to see it anyway. So I think that would be wise, unless you all object, since this is a planning commission function. Okay?
I concur.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, in that case, the appropriate motion would be to move that the Planning Commission go into executive closed session pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A, Parent 7, closed parent of the Code of Virginia, for consultation with legal counsel regarding legal advice, specifically regarding legal interpretation analysis of Reed versus the Town of Gilbert Supreme Court decision as it applies to your zoning ordinance.
Okay. Any objections?
Chairman would need a motion under the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay.
We need a specific motion adopting that, adopting what I just said, and then a second and a vote.
All right, so I make a motion that we go in closed session with the town's attorneys and the town planner for the express purpose of discussing the signed ordinance and the presentation tonight. Do I have a second?
I second that.
And did you include Mr. Hurd in that motion? I'm sorry.
If I did, I was remiss, and Mr. Hurd too, since he's the one that put it together. Everybody but the councilman sitting out in the audience. All right, so we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed? All right, we'll go into
Who was the guy?
We had a plan for public view back there. When Mr. Robinson came in, or one of the guys that live over on Walter Robinson came in and just took it and left. I was like, would you like a copy? I can get you a copy. And I'll kind of look sheepishly like I caught him stealing candy.
All right, I'm trying to- If you could bring us back in about the closed session.
Mr. Chairman, the appropriate motion would be that you move to certify that, one, only matters lawfully exempt from the open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session. And the vote on that should be by a roll call vote. And of course, you'll need a second.
I second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 All right, so we're agreeing that we're going to certify that we're going to move the sign ordinance to our October 6th special meeting, is what we agreed to do, correct?
Yes.
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 All right, so do we need to take just a vote on that, or we don't really need to vote, correct?
No.
Be part of the agenda for
Okay,
that
so we'll
evening's
make it part of
meeting.
the agenda. All right, well, thank you. All right, Mr. Marchand, take us home, please.
Just so I will work with Milt, as you suggested, it with the sign ordinance to deal with some refinements to temporary signs. I'll bring that back to you on the 6th. Last two items, comprehensive plan. The last month's meeting, we had discussed those edits we had made in the fall of 2013. I believe some of you have it, our draft electronically in a hard copy. I gave you basically the edits to date that the commission had made. There were some updates to the section regarding public utilities for Dominion, or there will be. The idea was to bring this forward at the same time that you're also considering the council direction or resolution to look at the land use designation of the 5 lots along Washington Street between Madison Street and, not Green Hill Crossing.
St. Paul's.
St. Paul's Drive. And the idea, as I gleaned from last month's meeting, is to vet those simultaneously. The plan that you were given with those edits was more of an update, things that are clearly inaccurate, simple things like the town center was supposed to be at Harover, now it's here. And when you go through, you'll see a lot of those red line edits. I still expect the on-call planning services to do a more rounded revision, but that'll be later on. So there's just kind of interim edits. So at this point, if you want to take a look at it, most of you may not have a chance to look over those edits. We can also bring that back on the 6th. I imagine the next step is to go ahead and schedule a public hearing for both of these items.
You wouldn't wait until after the on-call service does the final revision?
I think the idea is there's some edits that can be done, that need to be done right away.
Okay.
The fiscal impact analysis we did for rezonings was based on the CIP and also on some of the goals and action strategies in the plan. So if we're still showing the Harover, the town center down at Harover, when we're collecting profit dollars, someone may raise an eyebrow and say, well, your CIP says you have a town center here, but your plan says you have a town center down there. So it's resolving those inconsistencies. And then a more broader edit will be made by the consultant. So again, Mr. Chairman, recommend both of those items go to your October 6th work session, make any interim revisions that the group may find necessary or appropriate, and then go ahead and schedule it for public hearing. And then once you do that, you'll send it, your recommendation to the council for action.
All right, so what I'm hearing is the council's wishes. We're going to discuss the bylaws. We're going to go through between now and the 6th and look at the bylaws. We're going to have that night, the sign ordinance that night, in addition to the comp plan and the amended land use map. So,
I think that's doable. We'll make the October regular meeting short and sweet and to the point.
all right, I would just like us all to put our thoughts down prior to getting there, if nothing else, for the bylaws and the sign ordinance, so we can stay on point. And we're starting at 4:30 that night, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. We have the town planner 1 mile update.
You had a letter at the back of your packet, page 248. This was just for your information. There was a letter regarding zoning for substations, power substations specific to the to the Amazon substation just west of town. They call it the Midwood property. That's where the Amazon currently has their warehouse, and it's all that property south of south of 55. So this is just for your information in the packet. And that should be it. The next site plan you should have coming to you will be Chick-fil-A, I imagine. And then behind that, Sheets has fits and starts. They're really going. I haven't heard back from them. And then the ice rink, we got their plans approved. The construction plans are approved. I have no idea when they're going to start construction. So, what's that? Construction plans aren't approved? Okay, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Uh-oh.
If you go over to Winterham, you'll notice Winterham, most of the landscaping, they're redoing the landscaping around there. So look forward to Haymarket Day this weekend. We're going to need probably some extra volunteers. So Denise may be emailing you with requests for...
Already got tagged by Jen.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so Mr. Weir wanted announcement time at the end since we gave permission. Does anybody have an announcement they want to, other than adjourn and go home and eat dinner? Does anybody have an announcement?
No, I think we're good.
I want to thank you for your forbearance of staying here till 10 at night. And I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We won't even ask opposed because we all said aye. Thank you.
Overridden. Overruled.